April 12, 1981, in Keddie, California, the Sharp family and some friends went to sleep in cabin 28 in the Keddie Resort Lodge. What occurred next would shock the county and is a crime that is still actively being worked on today. 4 people sleeping in the house were brutally murdered. I can't imagine this is debris from the house. The house was demolished around 10 years ago because there were squatters and people like us that would come inside the house and try and stay overnight. Shit, maybe this is from the house. It looks like the bottoms of the foundation. Oh, Jesus Christ, dude. Look at that. It's like tile from the bathroom right there, it looks like.
People have turned alcove. There's a deer over there.
There's the remains and rubble of one of the greatest unsolved mysteries of all time, and you're looking at the fucking deer in the forest. As mentioned before, 4 people were killed in Keddie, 3 of which were found dead inside cabin 28. Their bodies were found by Sheila Sharp, who, unlike the rest of her...
Can I question, is this like Cabin in the Woods? I just want to put that out there, like, this makes you think of Cabin in the Woods. This is the Unsolved, if you think about it. Have you ever seen any of the movies of Cabin in the Woods? It's fucking, like, random shit that comes and kills them, like the forest, or ghost, or some shit fucking out there. Or crazy, stupid, inbred rednecks. No offense to the regular rednecks, but the ones that are just fucking horrible. Or their DNA is bred for them to go fucking batshit crazy. It's crazy. Anywho, back to the thing.
Family had slept at a friend's cabin next door. Sheila found the bodies of her mother, Sue Sharp, her 15-year-old brother, Johnny Sharp, and Johnny's 17-year-old friend, Dana Wingate. Sheila's 12-year-old sister, Tina, was missing from the scene, but her remains would be found at a different time, a fact that we'll touch on later. The sister of the people who got murdered here, the next morning she walks in, finds most of her family brutally murdered. She was staying next door at a friend's house.
Yeah.
Cabin 28 was right here. And that's where she found the bodies of her mom, her brother, her brother's friend, and they couldn't find her sister.
Are you spooked knowing that there were just, right around here?
Strangely, Sheila's 2 younger brothers, Greg, age 5, and Rick, age 10, were found in the cabin, in a bedroom, asleep and safe. In the same room, also found asleep and safe, was the boy's friend, Justin Smart. When you look at the scene of the crime, it's tough to fathom how they could have slept through such a tragedy. It's very hard while it was happening in the same fucking house.
The woods get loud, though, is my only thing.
But you're in a cabin.
In a cabin. Were they in the same cabin in the room next door?
So maybe they were in there telling ghost stories or something.
I don't think they were. They're probably asleep.
They could have been. You know how kids do.
That's not what pillow talk is, though.
That's what it was for me. Telling ghost stories. Pillow talk like, could mean something you do after sex, or it could mean...
Yeah, I think that's
it
what
could
that
mean with, like, a sleepover.
Do you tell ghost stories after sex?
That's for me and my girlfriend for now. Dana and Sue were all bound to some degree by electrical wiring. These weapons were found at the scene. A bent steak knife found on the floor, a bloodied butcher knife and claw hammer, both found on a small wooden table near the entryway to the kitchen. Blood splatters were found on the walls and ceiling, suggesting the kind of force used.
All very effective.
Sue Sharp had left a broken and abusive marriage and was described as a quiet woman who loved her kids. In 1980, Sue moved her kids to the Keddie area, where they lived in relative poverty. Let's return to the body of Tina Sharp, the one Sharp sibling missing from the cabin. Tina's skull would eventually be found due to an anonymous tip called into the police on the 3rd anniversary of the murders. The skull was found about 50 miles away in a whole other county. Aside from the timing, which is undoubtedly suspicious, what's truly dubious is the fact that the caller identified the skull as Tina's. But how could the caller have known that based on the skull alone? Of which there were really only 2 examined by the police at the time. Marty Smart and his roommate, Bobo Betty, who lived 2 cabins down from the Sharps. Let's go over a possible motive. Marty Smart was married to Marilyn Smart, the mother of Justin Smart, who was one of the kids that was found alive and well in the cabin. Marty was reportedly an abusive husband, and there are reports that Sue Sharp had been counseling Marilyn on her marriage. When finding out about Sue's interference with his marriage, Marty reportedly went ballistic about it. Marty reportedly left for Reno, Nevada soon after the murders. Law enforcement at the time felt that the killer was, quote, more than one person, end quote. Hence them throwing Marty's roommate Bo, who was an ex-con, into the case as an accomplice.
Because 3 people's alive.
At the time, the investigation strangely stopped there. There was evidence that seemingly went unnoticed, and people of interest that may have not been vetted properly. The father of Dana Wingate, the friend of the Sharps that was also killed, said in 2001 that the police had, quote, stumbled over each other and fouled up the case, and he isn't alone in that line of thinking, as many suspect the police on the case may have been involved in a cover-up. At this point, the entire...
On the morning of April 12, 1981, 14-year-old Sheila Sharp woke up after sleeping at a local neighbor's house for the night. She ate her breakfast, chatted with her neighbors, and then at around 7 a.m. decided to go back home and join her family in cabin number 28. She walked across the short path to her home, turned the handle, and pushed open the door expecting to be greeted by her mother, sister, brothers, and a local friend who stayed the night. Instead, she was met with a gruesome, violent, and frenzied murder scene. She discovered the brutally tortured corpses of her mother, brother, and his friend scattered around the blood-stained living room, and no sign of her younger sister.
The Kennedy murders are all unsolved. Quadruple homicide, which took place over the night of April 11th through the 12th in 1981 in Kennedy, California, United States. The victims were Glenna Susan Sue Sharp, Nee Davis, born March 29, 1945, daughter Tina Louise Sharp, born July 22, 1968, son John Stevens Sharp, born 1965, and John's friend Dana Hall Wingate, born February 8, 1964. Which just sounds pretty fucking old, and sounds like you slept over at the wrong dang time, sir. The murder took place in house number 28 of Kennedy Resort. The body of Sue, John, and Dana were found on the morning of April 12th by Sue's 14-year-old daughter, Sheila, who had been sleeping at a friend's house. Sue's 2 younger sons, Rick and Greg, as well as their friend Justin Smart, were also in the house, but were unharmed. Tina was missing from the scene. Tina remained a missing person until April 1984, when her skull and several other bones were recovered at Camp 18, California, near Feather Falls in Butte County. Multiple leads and suspects were examined in the intervening years, though no charges were filed. Several new leads were announced in the 21st century, including the discovery of hammer in the pond in 2016, as well as announcements regarding the discovery of new DNA evidence. In July 1979, Glenn Susan Sue Sharp, along with her 5 children, left her home in Connecticut after separating from their abusive husband, James Sharp. She decided to relocate in Northern California, where her brother Don was residing at the time. Upon arriving in California, she began renting a small trailer formerly occupied by her brother at the Claremont Trailer Village in Quincy. The following fall, she moved to the house number 28 in the rural Sierra Nevada resort town of Kennedy. The house was much larger than the other trailer, and It had become available when the Plumas County then Sheriff Sylvester Douglas Thomason moved out. There she resigned with a 15-year-old son, John, 14-year-old daughter Sheila, 12-year-old daughter Tina, and two sons, Rick, age 10 and age 5. On April 11, 1981, around 11:30, Sue, Sheila, and Greg drove the resort of the Friends, the Meeks family, to pick up Rick, who was attending baseball tryouts at Ganser Field in Quincy. They happened upon John and his friend, Dana Hall Wingate, at the mouth of the canyon from Quincy to Kennedy and picked them up, then drove about 6 miles away to Kennedy. 2 hours later, around 3:30, John and Dana hitchhiked back to Quincy, but they must have had plans to visit friends. Around this time, the two were seen in the city's downtown area. That same evening, Sheila had plans to spend the night with the Seabolt family, who lived in an adjacent home, while Sue's remained at home with Rick, Greg, and the boys' young friend, Justin Smart. Sheila departed house number 28 shortly after 8 p.m., leaving her mother alone with the younger children. Tina, who had been watching television about the Seabolt residents, returned home to 28 around 9:30 p.m. after Sheila arrived at the Seabolt to spend the night.
Susan Short packed up the family's possessions and left the home they shared with her husband in Connecticut and moved across the country to California. This was to be a new start for the family and for Sue, who was trying to escape her abusive husband, James. Her brother Don lived in Northern California at that time, and it seemed like a good idea to be close to family when trying to leave an abusive partner behind, as then, at least if James tracked her down, she would have some support. When she arrived in California, she had little to no money, no job, no valuables, and 5 kids to feed. So she took the trailer in which her brother used to live in Quincy. And despite the fact it was a tight fit for a family of 6, they felt relieved and happy to move somewhere new and start fresh. Not too long after arriving in California, an opportunity arose to move into a place called the Keddie Resort. Keddie was formerly a family resort which had fallen on hard times, and so the owner had converted many of the holiday cabins into low-income housing instead. One such cabin had recently been vacated by Sylvester Thomas, the county sheriff. And so, Susan packed their things up again and moved into cabin 28 at the Keddie Resort. Mother Susan and her kids John, Sheila, Tina, Rick, and Greg all looked forward to hopefully starting a new life together. With the horrific and brutal deaths of her mother, John, and his friend Dana. The floor and walls were covered in bloodstains, and there were random knife marks in the walls. All 3 victims had been bound with electrical tape and electrical cords. Sue was laid on her side near the sofa in the living room. She was nude from the waist down and had been gagged with a blue bandana and her own underwear, which had been fixed in place with electrical tape. Despite being naked from the waist down, the autopsy report states that there were no signs of forced sexual trauma. She had been stabbed in the chest and then stabbed horizontally in the neck, going through her larynx and also slightly catching her cervical spine. She also had bruises and imprints from where she'd been struck with the butt of an air rifle. John was found close by. His throat had been cut and had suffered blunt force trauma blows from a hammer. Dana had been repeatedly struck in the head with a hammer and then manually strangled to death until he asphyxiated.
Around 7 a.m. on the morning, April 12th, Sheila returned to cabin 28, discovered the dead bodies of Sue, John, and Dana in the house living room. All 3 had been bound with medical tape and electrical cords. Tina was absent from the home, while 3 younger children, Rick, Greg, and Justin, were unharmed in an adjacent bedroom. Initial reports stated that the 3 young boys had slept through the incident. Through this was later contradicted. Which Justin gave conflicting stories of the evening, including that he had dreams details of the murders, though he later claimed to have actually witnessed them. In his later account of events, told under hypnosis. He claimed to be awoken to the sounds coming to the living room while asleep in the bedroom with Rick and Greg, Investigating the sounds, he saw Sue with two men, one with a mustache, short hair, and the other clean-shaved with long hair. Both wore glasses, according to Justin. John and Dana then entered the home and began heatedly arguing with the men. A fight ensued, which Tina entered the room and was taken out of the cabin's back door by one of them. Based on Justin's description and composed sketches of the two unknown men were produced by Harlan Embry, a man who, with no artistic ability and training in forensic sketching. It was never explained why, with the access to the Justice Department and Federal Bureau of Investigation, top forensic artist, law enforcement chose to use an amateur who sometimes volunteered to help police. In the press release accompanying the sketches, the suspects were described as being in their late 30s. One stood 5'11" to 6 feet 2. Tall, with dark blonde hair, and the other one between 5'6" and 5'10" inches, with black, grayish hair. Both wore gold-framed glasses. Rumors regarding the crimes being ritualistic or motivated by drug trafficking were dismissed by Plymouth County Sheriff Doug Thomas, who stated in the week following the murders that no drug paraphernalia or illegal drugs were found in the home. A family acquaintance later told detectives that Dana Wingate had recently stolen an unknown quantity of LSD from the local drug dealers, though she was unable to provide any proof of this claim. About 4,000 man-hours were spent working on this case. It was just extremely frustrating. In December 1983, detectives ruled out serial killers Henry Lee Lucas and Otis Toole as potential suspects. Upon discovering the scene, Sheila rushed back to the Seabolt's house, whereupon Jamie Seabolt retrieved Rick, Greg, and Justin through the bedroom window. He later admitted to having briefly entered the home through the back door to see if anyone was still alive, potentially contaminating evidence in the process. The murders of Sue, Joe, and Dana were notably vicious. 2 bloody knives and 1 hammer were found at the scene. One of the knives, a steak knife later determined to have been used in the murders, had been bent in roughly 30 degrees. Blood splatter evidence from the inside of the house indicated that the murders of Sue, John, and Dana had all taken place in the living room. Sue was discovered laying on the side near the living room sofa, nude with waist down and gagged with a blue bandana. See, that's why I don't trust people. That's why I don't fucking trust people, though. I guess the little details don't fucking matter. Like yellow or blue or, whatever. I'm just gonna put that out there. I don't know where they're reading. I know what I'm reading. I don't know. It's whatever. Into her own underwear, which had been securing with tape. She had been stabbed in the chest. Her throat was stabbed horizontally, the wound going through her larynx and nicking her spine. And on the side of her head was an implant matching the butt of a Daisy 880 Powerline BB pellet rifle. John's throat was slashed. Dana had multiple head injuries and had been manually strangled to death. John and Dana suffering blunt-force trauma to their heads caused by the hammer or hammers. Autopsies determined that Sue and Joe died from knife wounds and blunt-force trauma, and Dana died of asphyxiation.
The immediate horror subsided. Sheila ran back over to the Seabolt residence to get help. Jamie, the eldest Seabolt's son, went back to the cabin with Sheila, where he looked in the bedroom windows and amazingly saw that all 3 of the young boys were still in bed sleeping. He knocked loudly on the window and woke them up, and motioned for them to exit through the window so that they wouldn't see the gruesome crime scene in the living room. Police were then contacted and began their investigation. After interviewing, Sheila and the Seabolt family both stated that they heard nothing unusual coming from cabin 28 throughout the night. However, the couple living in number 16 stated that they were woken at 1:15 a.m. by what sounded like muffled screaming. Rick Sharp was interviewed by the police and stated he fell asleep at 10 p.m. and did not wake again until the following day when Jamie Seabolt knocked on the window. This was echoed by Justin Smart, but the police did not initially interview 5-year-old Greg.
4/12/81, approximately 1000 hours. I contacted Sharp Richard James, 10-year-olds. He said that he, his brothers Greg, his friend Justin, sister Tina went to bed approximately 2200 hours. 4/11/81. They fell asleep and didn't wake until someone banged on the window. He and the others, his brother and his friend, were removed through a window. When they went to bed, his mother was lying on the couch watching TV. He said that Brother John was bringing Wingate to spend the night. He said Tina went to bed same time as boys. 4/12/81. Approximately 1500 hours. I talked to Smart, Justin Dwayne. He spent night with Sharps, went to bed about 2200 and awoke by someone banging on the window of the bedroom. He heard nothing after going to sleep and was not disturbed at all. He said that when we went to bed, following were in the house. Mother was on the couch watching TV. His friend Richard and brother Greg and sister Tina also went to bed at 2200 hours. Police also interviewed neighbors. 4/12/81. Approximately 10:30 hours. I contacted submitted Thomas Carmerson, 23 years, Kevin 14, Kennedy 281-4076. His house is south of the Sharp house. He and his family came home last night for 11/81, approximately 2000 hours. As he was entering his house, he looked towards the Sharp house and saw a female doing dishes in the kitchen sink. He stayed up till 0200 hours, but didn't hear anything unusual in the area.
Upon walking the scene, police noticed that there were no signs of forced entry, and that Tina's jacket and a box containing various tools had gone missing from the Sharp cabin. The telephone had also been disconnected and the curtains closed. When local neighbour Martin Smart, father to Justin Smart, had been interviewed, he had claimed that a claw hammer had gone missing from his possession, and he had no idea how or when. Sheriff Thomas commented that Smart had seemed to provide endless clues, which all seemed to point away from himself. Despite almost nobody hearing anything unusual in the night, several neighbours did report seeing an unfamiliar green van parked outside the Sharps' house at 9 p.m. Upon further interview, Justin Smart, Martin Smart's stepson, changed his story and its details, later stating that he had dreamed details of the murders, and then later claiming to have actually witnessed them. When questioned under hypnosis, he described being awoken by sounds coming from the living room when he was still sleeping in the bedroom. When he went to see what was happening, he claimed to see Sue with two men, one with a mustache and short hair, the other clean-shaven with long hair, both wearing glasses. Justin stated that John and Dana entered the home and began arguing with the men. A fight broke out, after which Tina entered the room and was then dragged out of the cabin's back door, never to be seen again.
Tina's disappearance was initially investigated by the FBI as a possible abduction, though it was reported on April 29, 1981 that the FBI had backed off the search as the California State Department of Justice was doing an adequate job and made the FBI's presence unnecessary. A grid pattern search of the area, covering a 5-mile radius around the house, was conducted by the police canines, but the efforts were fruitless. April 22nd, 1984. 3 years, 11 days after the murders, a bottle collector discovered the cranium portion of a skull and part of the mandible at Cap 18, near Feather Falls in neighboring Butte County. Discovery of roughly 100 miles from the Kennedy. Shortly after announcing the discovery, the Butte County Sheriff County Office received an anonymous call that identified the remains of being belonging to Tina. But the call was not documented in the case. A recording of this call was found at the bottom of the evidence box, some point in 2013 by the deputy who was assigned the case. The remains were confirmed by forensic pathologists to be those of Tina in June 1984. Near the remains, detectives also discovered a blue nylon jacket, a blanket, and a pair of Levi Strauss jeans with a missing back pocket, and an empty medical tape dispenser. There has been subsequent developments, since the murder of blah blah blah. The house in which the murders occurred was demolished in 2004. In a 2008 documentary of the murders, Marilyn Smart claimed that she suspected her husband, Martin, and his friend John Boudreaux, originally reported as Jean Boudreaux, by all the reporter Scott, was responsible for the murders. Marilyn claimed that on the evening of April 11, 1981, she had left Martin and Boudreaux at a local bar at 11 p.m. and returned home to go to sleep. Around 2 a.m. on April 12th, she stated that she woke to find the two burning an unknown item in the wood stove. Additionally, she alleged that Martin hated Johnny Sharp with a passion. However, in 2008 documentary, Sheriff Doug Thomas said he had personally interviewed Martin and that he had passed a polygraph examination. According to a 2016 article published by the Sacramento Bee, Martin had left Keddie and driven to Reno, Nevada shortly after the murders. From there, he sent a letter to Maryland ruminating on the personal struggles in their marriage, which he concluded with, "I paid the price of your love, and now I brought it with 4 people's lives." In a 2016 interview, Gamberg stated that the letter was overlooked in the initial investigation and never admitted as evidence. He later criticized the quality of the initial investigation, saying, "You could take someone just coming out of the academy and they would have done a better job." A counselor whom Martin regularly visited also allegedly that he had admitted to the murders of Sue and Tina, but claimed, "I did not have anything to do with the boys." What was the name? Rick, Red, and Justin. Here we go. He allegedly told the counselor that Tina was killed to prevent her from identifying him, as she had witnessed the whole thing. Martin died of cancer in Portland, Oregon in June 2000. John Boudet, who originally had ties to the organized crime in Chicago, died there in 1988. On March 24, 2016, a hammer matching the description of the hammer Martin claimed to have lost was discovered in a local pond. Okay, excuse me. Hello. There's like a million of those fucking hammers in the world that was made. So how did I know it was that one? I don't know. Whatever. It don't add up. And taken into evidence by the Plymouth County Special Investigator Mike Gamberg. Plymouth County Sheriff Hagwood, who was 16 years old at the time of the murders and knew the Sharp family personally, stated the location it was found, it would have been initially put there. It would have not been there accidentally misplaced. How do you accidentally misplace a fucking hammer in a pond? Oh, I think I'll just place it here and come back later for you. Yeah, no. Gamer also stated that at the time, 6 potential suspects were being examined. In 2018, Gamberg stated that the DNA evidence recovered from the piece of tape on the crime scene matched that of a known living suspect. So, there's no more cabin, because people kept showing up, interviewing it, trying to stay the night in there, see the ghost, blah blah blah. So, either way, I don't know who could have done it, and there was not a lot of information on it, so I can't give you my personal thoughts. I don't know. Let's see. So, I guess we're on to endnotes, right? Let's see. So, pretty much, that is all I could research. I looked, I studied, I kept reading. There's nothing pretty much was, besides the newer, investigators were like, what did y'all do? Let a 3-year-old fucking investigate this? It could have been done better by a rookie, La-di-da, blah, blah, blah. But I'm gonna wrap it up here, ladies and gentlemen. So y'all have fun, listen to it, like it up, share, whatever y'all want to do with it. Come back next week for a new one. How about that? Let's do it. Have a wonderful evening. Bye.
Can you tell me what you love about crime? Can you tell me what you wanna know? I can give you what you need. Do you wanna know what they did first? Now can you tell me? Now can you tell